Welcome to Blinded by Science, a weekly appreciation of all things science. I'm your host, Anthony Nanfito, sci-fi writer and teacher. But for this podcast, you can think of me as your science ambassador. You can subscribe to Blinded by Science on the YouTube channel Nanfito Space, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Visit anchor.fm/blinded by science for more details. All right, let's get to the science. Have you ever had a problem or a mystery you were trying to solve? How did you go about solving it? Every day we're faced with countless problems that need fixing, as individuals and as nations. Wouldn't it be great if we had a systematic process for solving problems? Well, that's what science is. It's a process for identifying problems, envisioning a solution, and submitting it through rigorous testing to make sure it works. In this episode, we'll be appreciating science as a process, what it is, how it works, and why it's important. Before recording, I used the almighty and all-knowing Google to look up what is science. I had an idea in my head, but I wanted to see what others had to say about the topic. I found several definitions that adequately explain what science is, but I'm only going to share one with you now. If you want to see others, you can check out the show notes in the video description of this episode on my YouTube channel, Nanfito Space. My favorite definition comes from NASA's Space Place, and it describes science as the, quote, curiosity in thoughtful action about the world and how it behaves, end quote. And that curiosity is in every single human being. Sadly, for a lot of us, it doesn't survive to adulthood, but I believe it can be revived and brought back to what it once was in childhood. That's one of the reasons I wanted to create this podcast, to share my love of science and inspire the curiosity that's inside all of us. But I digress. Let's get back to the science. I think a lot of people, and often the media, through no fault of their own, have the misconception that science is a nice, tidy package with a bow on top, like the ones that sit under a Christmas tree. If you've ever watched a child curiously exploring their world, then you know that science is anything but neat and tidy. Imagine a young child, perhaps 2 or 3 years old, sitting at a table eating some Cheerios or other bite-sized food. The child drops one. It falls to the floor. Intrigued, the child drops another, and another, and another. This is the curiosity through thoughtful action described by NASA in their definition of science. This imagined child is exploring its world through curiosity, and it learns that when you drop things, they fall. Later, the child will grow up to learn that this thing is called gravity, and we'll talk about it too. But for now, let's just acknowledge that science is messy, but it's also fun. Also described on NASA's Space Place, quote, science is not just a step-by-step approach to discovery. Science is more like a mystery, inviting anyone who is interested to become a detective and join in on the fun, end quote. Just like in a good detective story, the detective doesn't find the clues to solve the mystery in a neat and orderly fashion. No. That would make for a boring read and a very unbingeable Netflix show. We're curious creatures. We love a good mystery, whether it's fictional or scientific. And solving any good mystery involves things getting messy. That's what makes it thrilling. All right. We've defined what science is, but there are some other terms that scientists use regularly, namely hypothesis and theory. Let's sort out what they mean because in everyday English, their meanings are more casual than the rigorous definitions used by scientists. Here's another quote from NASA's Space Place that I think sums up the meanings of both terms quite nicely. Quote, an idea that predicts how the world works is called a hypothesis. If an idea or hypothesis correctly predicts how something will behave, we call it a theory. If an idea explains all the facts or evidence that we have found, we also call it a theory. End quote. In school, most of us were taught the scientific method in science class, and we used it to practice science. While this isn't exactly how scientists go about conducting their own practice of science, it does give us a framework to work with. Now, there are a lot of different versions of the scientific method that vary across fields, but here's a condensed version. First, make an observation. Cheerios fall when I drop them. Second, create a hypothesis. Cheerios can't fly or float. Third, make a prediction. When I drop this Cheerio, it will fall. Fourth, conduct an experiment and collect data. Drop a Cheerio. Drop another Cheerio. And another. And another. Last, review your results and compare them to your prediction. Was your prediction accurate? Yep, Cheerios will always fall when I drop them. Thanks, gravity. If your prediction didn't match your experiment's results, then you need to review your hypothesis and test it again. If your prediction did match, then you need to share your results with others to test it as well. This is what science is, and this is why it's so powerful. It is the process by which we collect data, solve problems, and get others to review our work. Scientists do this in large groups, tens of thousands within a field of study, all around the globe. This is what's called peer review. When a scientist publishes their experimental data in a scientific journal, it gets reviewed and their hypothesis is tested by many other scientists to confirm or disprove their results. We'll see a specific example in the second segment. When this process is repeated again and again and again, scientists are able to say with certainty what is true and what is not true about the world and universe we live in. When they reach a consensus of 99.9%, all in agreement, then it's called a theory. And this is what I think makes science so cool. It's about testing and retesting things to make sure we've got it right. And when we didn't get it right, it means going back and updating our views. That's the beauty of the error-correcting mechanism of the peer review process within the scientific process. In the end, scientists all have each other's backs because future scientific work depends on them getting the process right so that others can build upon it. And all of this is hugely powerful when making decisions, either for personal decisions about your everyday life, like dropping Cheerios, or for the life-death decisions made by leaders of nations. We all need solid facts to stand on. Otherwise, things might end badly for us. That's it for this segment. We're going to take a short break before moving on to our next segment called Science Did What? Welcome back. The second segment of the pod is called Science Did What? Because it's where I dive into the recent discoveries scientists are making right now. For this episode, I want to focus on the recent story related to the phosphine gas found on Venus. If you haven't heard about this story, let me catch you up. In September of this year, an international team of astronomers made headlines when it reported findings of phosphine gas on Venus. Why is this significant, you ask? Well, as far as we know, the main producers of phosphine gas are microorganisms. That's where most of it comes from on Earth, anyways. Now, you can get phosphine from other sources, such as volcanic activity, which Venus also has, but the original report from September reported as much as 20 parts per billion, which is significantly higher than what you'd expect from volcanic activity alone. Since the original report was published, several studies have been published questioning the findings. But don't worry, that's the scientific process in action. That's how it works in real life. As described in the first segment, you create a hypothesis, make a prediction, collect data, analyze the data, and then share it with others to get feedback. And that feedback is vital to refining our ideas, testing our hypotheses, and bettering our understanding of the fundamental truths of the universe. And that's what this team of astronomers is doing, which is amazing. They're collaborating, they're sharing and receiving feedback, all for the sake of gaining new knowledge and finding new discoveries. So, what happened with all those criticisms? Well, the original team of researchers went back and reanalyzed their findings. And in that subsequent analysis, they found that the phosphine gas peaks at about 5 parts per billion, not 20, which is significantly lower. However, it's still higher than what would be expected from volcanic activity. So what does this mean? Well, more data and analysis is needed. Unfortunately, the only probe in orbit of Venus right now is Japan's Akatsuki, and it doesn't have an instrument to detect phosphine, which would really help settle the debate. Until a probe can be sent there with such an instrument, astronomers will have to continue with Earth-based observations. Whether or not phosphine gas is found on Venus and it is created by microorganisms or some other unknown process is only going to be determined with more time, more study, and more data collection. And that's the power of science. It's a process. But when we trust in the process and we are patient with it, it reveals the most extraordinary truths of the universe to us. That's all for this inaugural episode of Blinded by Science. I'm your host, Anthony Nanfito, and thanks for listening. I want to give a shout out to my friend Marisa for her insightful feedback in creating this episode. Thanks so much, Marisa. Episodes will be released weekly on the YouTube channel Nanfito Space or wherever you listen to podcasts. Visit anchor.fm/blindedbyscience for more details. Thanks for listening to this episode of Blinded by Science. This podcast was recorded, produced, and distributed by yours truly, Anthony Nanfito, using anchor.fm. The theme song is Crimson Fly by Huma Huma. The logo was designed by myself using the app Over with image credit to nasa.gov. If you liked what you heard, subscribe to the podcast on the YouTube channel Nanfito Space, or listen wherever you get your podcasts. To support the show financially, learn how to subscribe, or listen to previous episodes, visit anchor.fm/blindedbyscience for more details. Until next time, I encourage you to find the science in your life and share it with me on social media. You can find me on Twitter at WordsByFifi and on Instagram at HaikuByFifi. Tag me in your posts and show me the science you discovered. This is Anthony Nanfito signing off. And remember, stay curious.